On the 2nd of June, 1572, the ancestor of the man who just orchestrated a coronation was publicly beheaded by order of the crown. His crime, an attempt to seize the throne. His weapon, a secret marriage and a conspiracy. His execution became a curse upon his entire line. They lost everything: titles, lands, future. You have seen this man on television, conducting a symphony of power. But to understand how a family of traitors returned from oblivion to become the chief guardians of the monarchy, you must forget the splendor of the ceremony. Because the key to their survival is not hidden in the royal archives. It is sealed within the cold stones of their ancestral castle. A castle that first became an accomplice in the greatest conspiracy of its time, and then was forced to pay a terrible price for it. The year is 2023, Westminster Abbey. The air is thick, almost solid with anticipation. The world watches as a nation crowns its king. Every gesture is precise, every word an echo from the depths of time. But this is not magic, it is mechanics, and these mechanics have a chief engineer. His name is Edward Fitzalan Howard, the 18th Duke of Norfolk. He is the Earl Marshal of England. In his hands, a golden staff, but on his shoulders, the weight of 1,000 years of protocol. He moves through air thickened with incense and 1,000-year-old prayers, conducting a symphony of power where every note was written in the blood of his ancestors hundreds of years before he was born. He is the master of the ceremony, the man who literally places the crown on the head of the monarchy. His face is a mask of calm, but look into his eyes, not at the chandeliers reflected in them, but at the shadow behind that gleam. There is no triumph there. There is knowledge of the price. To orchestrate a coronation, one must understand the true cost of the crown, and that price is not stamped in gold. It is written in the stone of his home. And when the hymns fall silent, when the television cameras go dark, the echo of his footsteps changes the acoustics. We are transported from this deafening splendor to a deafening silence. Arundel Castle. There are no crowds here, no music, only a draft that roams the halls like a restless spirit. Sunlight falls on the floor, not in golden rays, but in surgical incisions, dissecting the ancient dust in the air. The parquet floors groan under the weight of invisible feet. This house does not stand, it watches. It breathes the cold of stone, smells of wax, old leather, and something else. Something like an old, ingrained fear. The walls are not decorated with portraits. They are studded with the eyes of ancestors, men in armor, women in tight corsets. Their gazes follow you, weighing whether you are worthy to bear their name. They do not ask who you are. They ask what you have paid. Here, every room is an invoice. This ballroom, where the polished wood reflects the emptiness, was built on vanity. This library, with its thousands of dead voices in leather bindings, was paid for with loneliness. And the chapel, it is steeped in the prayers of those who knew their faith was a death sentence. This is not a story about a building. It is a story about the ghosts who are still paying for it. This is the ledger of a dynasty, where the profit column reads survival, and the expenses column lists souls, ambitions, and severed heads. The year is 1066. England is being torn apart. This is not a battle of noble knights. This is a hostile takeover. The air smells of wet steel, fear, and burning straw. The Saxon kingdoms are old, clumsy assets, slated for liquidation. At the head of this raid is William, but he has his top managers, his executive directors of conquest. One of them is Roger de Montgomery, a man with cold eyes and a heavy hand. He is not a dreamer. He is a pragmatist. He sees in the English land not the poetry of the hills, but a resource, not people, but a workforce. And when the smoke clears, the division of profits begins. Montgomery receives his share in this bloody enterprise. He gets Sussex, and he must secure his title. The construction of the first Arundel Castle is not an act of creation. It is an act of branding. Like a red-hot iron on the hide of cattle, this castle was meant to burn a new name onto the Saxon land. Normandy. No blueprints inspired by God, only cold calculation. First, they round up the locals like a herd of cattle. With their hands, their sweat, their desperation, they raise an artificial hill. This hill is not part of the landscape. It is a fist of clay and terror rising over the valley, an insult to the land itself. It was meant to scream for miles around, "Your world is dead. Now you live in our shadow." And on top of this fist, they place a keep. Not a palace, not a home, but a stone eye that never blinks. The simple, brutal geometry of power. Its arrow slits are not windows. They are pupils staring down at the conquered. This tower was not built to let in sunlight. It was built to watch over slaves. Every stone here was dragged on a broken back. Every cubic meter of mortar was mixed with fear. The sounds of construction were not the banging of hammers, but the creaking of bones and the clang of chains. They were not building a sanctuary. They were erecting a prison, where they were the jailers, and the entire country was the inmate. Roger de Montgomery's reward, 157 manors. A harvest reaped from a field of broken shields and unmarked graves. Arundel Castle was not a gift from the king. It was his dividend. This was the first account opened in the bank of this castle, the first entry in its book of debts. The castle's initial capital was violence, and this debt will never be repaid. It will simply be passed on. The 16th century. Thomas Howard, 4th Duke of Norfolk, stands at the pinnacle of the world. He is the wealthiest, the most powerful aristocrat in England. His blood runs so close to the throne, he can almost feel its warmth. But almost is a word for other people. For him, it is an insult. He does not look at Arundel as a home. He sees it as a training ground for his ego, a tool, a stake in the greatest of all games, because his ambition has a name. Mary, Queen of Scots, the captive Queen of Scotland. To England, she is a threat. To him, an opportunity. She is not a woman. She is the missing piece of his crown. Marriage to her is not a union of two hearts. It is the merger of two kingdoms under his hand. A bride by the name of power, and the castle becomes his accomplice. It ceases to be a dwelling and transforms into a headquarters. Its corridors learn to keep silent. The stone floors, accustomed to the echo of footsteps, now hear only the sliding of shadows. Heavy tapestries absorb the whispers of treason, like a sponge soaks up wine. The air here smells not of the hearth and dinner, but of the hot wax used to seal secret letters. The architecture of his design is not stone. It is a spider's web, and Arundel is its center. Threads stretch from the library, where a quill scratches out ciphers destined for Rome and Madrid. They vibrate in the great dining hall, where behind every compliment lies a question, and behind every smile, an assessment of loyalty. They tremble in his private chambers, where at night he gazes at Mary's portrait, seeing in her face not tragedy, but his future. He is not fortifying the walls to defend against an enemy. He is fortifying them to contain his giant, swelling secret within. These halls, built for balls and receptions, become silent witnesses to the weaving of the Ridolfi plot. The gleam of the gilded ceilings is meant to blind the queen's spies. The clinking of glasses, to drown out the cracking of ice beneath the conspirators' feet. Every feast, every reception is a performance, a diversion, while in the cellars of his soul, the keys to the tower and the throne room are being forged. The castle is his collateral. He is ready to wager everything: his title, his wealth, his very life. He is betrothed to power, and Arundel is their nuptial chamber, where instead of vows, there are whispers of conspiracy, and instead of a wedding ring, a head will be laid upon the altar. The 19th century. Industry coughs up black smoke. The world is obsessed with speed, steel, and the future. And Arundel Castle is slowly dying. For nearly 2 centuries, it has stood like a skeleton. The Civil War gutted it, and then time finished it off. The wind howls through the empty sockets of its windows, carrying the scent of damp earth and oblivion. No one dances in its halls. Birds build their nests. The stones that remembered the roar of Cromwell's cannons are now overgrown with lichen, like an old man's stubble. This is not a home. It is a monument to humiliation. And then he arrives. Henry Fitzalan Howard, the 15th Duke of Norfolk, a man in whose soul faith was not a quiet harbor, but a burning coal. He looks at these ruins and does not see an architectural problem. He sees an open wound inflicted upon his family and his God by centuries of persecution. For him, these ruins are a personal insult delivered by history, and he declares war, a war on time. His goal is not simply to restore. That word is too weak, too cowardly. He decides to rebuild the castle from scratch, to resurrect it, to make it more Gothic, more ancient, more powerful than it ever was. This is not a restoration. This is an act of theological revenge. The battle begins, a war of sounds. The screech of winches and the hiss of steam tear into the medieval silence. Hundreds of workers, like an army, lay siege to the old walls. The air grows thick with the taste of lime dust and the smell of sweat. It is a battle with physics itself. Engineers try to implant the nervous system of a new century into the body of a 1,000-year-old giant. Elevators, like steel pistons, pierce the stone flesh of the towers. Central heating lays hot veins along the walls, making the cold stone feel warmth for the first time in 900 years. It is also a battle with public opinion. Newspaper headlines hiss, "Papist luxury." £600,000 sterling, a fortune that could have built hospitals and schools, is spent to satisfy the pride of a single Catholic aristocrat. They see vanity. He sees his duty. Every stone hoisted onto the scaffolding is a word in his answer to Protestant England. Every stained glass window commissioned for his new chapel is an act of defiance. Every crenellation on the tower is a shout that their faith did not die in the tower. It has returned home, and now it is clad in impenetrable armor of stone. He is not just building a castle. He is rewriting history, erasing the pages of defeat, and writing a single giant chapter of his triumph. He forces time to run backward, but on his own terms. In the end, a phantasm is born, a creation that looks more ancient than the original, but within which beats the mechanical heart of the Victorian era. The war is won, but its price is the creation of a beautiful monster, born of faith, pride, and unlimited money. These walls are a trap, a golden cage that always offers a choice. But here, the price of freedom and the price of salvation are never the same. 2 stories, 2 prisoners, 1 castle. Act 1, 1846. Victoria is coming to Arundel, the Queen, the Empress, the embodiment of the Protestant power that for centuries tried to wipe the Howard family from the face of the earth. And the castle goes mad. It ceases to be a home and becomes a theatrical stage. A fever of vanity begins. The Duke spends a fortune to prove his loyalty. The old furniture is thrown out. New furniture is commissioned, worthy of her touch. An entire wing is rebuilt, so Her Majesty won't feel a draft from the past. Her portrait is painted. The best chefs are hired. The library is turned into a ballroom where books that have been silent for centuries will now be deafened by music and laughter. Everything for her, all for 3 days. And now, she is here. The castle bows at her feet. Silks rustle across the polished parquet. Diamonds catch the candlelight, shattering it into 1,000 shards. Music plays. Wine is served. The Duke and his family smile, the perfect smile of vassals receiving their mistress. This is not a visit. It is an act of surrender, draped in velvet and gold. They show her their wealth, their power, their home, all just to say, "Look, all of this belongs to you. We are no longer a threat." A 3-day performance to buy themselves another century of security. And now, Act 2. The curtain falls, the stage empties, the lights go out, and we hear the echo of another story within these very same walls. The 16th century. Philip Howard lives here, son of that same executed duke who gambled with the crown and lost. Philip is offered the same deal, the splendor of the court, the smile of Queen Elizabeth, wealth, security. The golden cage is open, but he sees the bars. He smells the scent of captivity. He looks at the luxury they are trying to buy him with and understands it is paid for with renunciation. And he says no. He chooses not the queen, but God, not the body, but the soul. He knows this choice is a one-way ticket to the Tower. And now we see the contrast. In the very same space, separated by 2 centuries, here is the ballroom where Victoria danced. And here, in this very spot, Philip prayed, knowing they were already coming for him. Here are the luxurious apartments where the Queen slept, and here is the gloom of a prison cell where Philip breathed dampness and despair for 10 years. He lost everything: the castle, his title, his family, his freedom. And in that darkness, in that emptiness, he found everything. He did not build himself palaces. He carved words onto the stone wall of his cell. The more suffering for Christ in this life, the more glory with Christ in the next. The castle always offers a choice. You can accept its rules, throw a ball for the Queen, and reign within it for 3 days. Or you can reject its lies, die in prison, and become a saint forever. The web that Thomas Howard wove in the silence of Arundel began to tear, thread by thread. First, a dull knock at the gates, not petitioners, not guests, the Queen's men. They do not ask permission to enter. They enter. The echo of their boots on the stone flags is a metronome, counting down the last beats of the Duke's heart. They are searching, not for gold, not for works of art. They are searching for proof, paper, ink, a cipher. They overturn the carpets that were meant to hide the conspirators' footsteps, and now were meant to hide their tracks, and under one of them, they find it. A packet of letters, the ciphered breath of treason caught on paper. Ambition, sealed in wax, becomes a death sentence. The castle, which was his headquarters, turns into a crime scene. Its walls, which kept his secrets, now testify against him. Every portrait on the wall looks at him with condemnation. Every corridor he walked as a king now seems like the path to the scaffold. The trial is a formality. The verdict was passed the moment the guard lifted the carpet. The words "guilty of high treason" sound not like news, but like a long-written epilogue. And then, the climax. June 2nd, 1572. Tower Hill. The day is gray, indifferent. The crowd is a sea of hungry eyes. They have come to watch greatness die, to see the tallest oak in the forest fall. Thomas Howard ascends the steps of the scaffold. The wood creaks beneath his feet. He looks out at London, at the world he wanted to conquer. He doesn't see a city. He sees a map of his unfulfilled hopes. This is not just the death of one man. It is the beheading of an entire lineage. It is an act of state vandalism. The crown is not merely punishing a rebel. It is tearing out by the root the very idea that anyone other than itself can claim absolute power. The executioner raises his axe. The gleam of steel is blinding for a moment. The strike, a dull, wet sound. And at that very moment, many miles away, something cracks within the walls of Arundel. An invisible fissure runs through the castle's very foundation. It is the sound of its master's fall, echoing in the stone. It is an earthquake in the history of one family. The aftershocks of this blow will shake their world for centuries. They didn't just lose a duke. They lost their audacity. From this day forward, they will remember that the price of ambition is sharp steel on the neck, and this fear will seep into their blood, into their land, into their castle. The castle, which had survived the executioner's axe, was now to meet a force far more impersonal and cruel. The grindstones of history. 1644. England is no longer a united kingdom, but a torn body at war with itself. The fever of civil war had finally reached here. These hills, these walls. No more courtly intrigues, no secret letters and conspiracies. There is only the roar. At first, it was a low hum, a vibration in your teeth. Parliament's army was approaching the walls of Arundel. Men in dull leather and simple steel. Men for whom the name Howard was not a legend, but simply the name of an enemy. For them, this castle is not a repository of heritage. It is a strategic point on a map, a knot that must be cut. And then, the first blow strikes. Not the clash of swords, but the coughing roar of a cannon, and the first scream of stone. A cannonball, a black iron fist, slams into the wall, knocking out a fountain of splinters that had been accumulating here for 6 centuries. The castle shudders with its entire gigantic body. It was accustomed to sieges, but this was a different war. A war of a new age. A war of gunpowder and iron. 18 days. In a calendar, it's just a few pages. Within these walls, it was an entire era of agony. At first, the royalist defenders answer. Their muskets snap back like angry dogs, but their voices are drowned out by the thunder of the parliamentary artillery. Day after day, hour after hour, an iron hail hammers the walls. The pounding became as monotonous as the tolling of a doomsday clock. The stonework, which remembered its Norman builders, becomes pockmarked by cannonballs. The castle's pride turns into its wounds. Inside the walls, time slows down, becoming viscous, like swamp water, the smell of gunpowder mixed with the icy breath of winter, seeping into every crevice. Hope, that most perishable of commodities in any war, began to rot first, turning first into stubbornness, then into hunger, and finally into a dull, indifferent apathy. The taste of despair was metallic, like blood. On the 18th day, it is over. A white flag rises over one of the towers, not a symbol of peace, a symbol of exhaustion. The creak of the gates opening for the victors sounds louder than any cannon shot. It is the sound of humiliation. Parliament's soldiers enter. Their muddy boots tread upon polished parquet floors where duchesses once danced. They look at tapestries depicting mythical heroes and see only thick fabric to shelter them from the cold. They pass by portraits of ancestors whose painted eyes gaze upon them with powerless aristocratic contempt. But for the victors, simply capturing the castle is not enough. By Cromwell's order, it must be slighted. It is a cold, engineering term that conceals an act of monstrous violence. They don't just leave, they decide to break the castle's spine. At key points, under the main gate, at the base of the strongest towers, they place barrels of gunpowder. This is not the fury of battle. It is the methodical, cold execution of stone. A fuse, a spark, a deafening, suffocating silence for a few seconds. And then, an explosion. The earth trembles. The walls, which had stood for centuries, don't just crumble. They are torn out by the roots. Thousands of tons of stone are thrown into the air, only to crash down in a shapeless heap. The castle, which had survived kings and conspirators, now stands with its chest cavity ripped open, revealing its gutted halls to the sky. For almost 200 years, it would stand like this, not a ruin, a skeleton, empty, cold, a monument to the fact that even the strongest stone cannot withstand the winds of history when they truly begin to blow. Stone can outlive a man, but it cannot outlive history. The noise of the coronation fades. The golden dust of the ceremony settles, and the 18th Duke of Norfolk returns home. The sound of his car's tires on the 1,000-year-old gravel is the only dissonance in this deafening silence. The click of the heavy oak door cuts him off from our world. He is alone again, face to face with his inheritance. He walks through halls that, just a few hours ago, were full of life. But it was not his life. It was the life of tourists. A new army, one that captured the castle without a single shot. An army armed not with pikes, but with cameras. Every day they invade, their voices merging into a polite hum, their footsteps erasing the last traces of ghosts. The air here still smells of them, a mixture of perfume, curiosity, and the slight disappointment that history looks smaller up close than it does in books. The castle has learned to accept them. It no longer watches with menace. It poses. It has ceased to be a fortress and has become a stage, the perfect backdrop for other people's vacations. The Duke walks past a suit of knight's armor. Once, a living heart beat inside this steel, full of fury and fear. Now, it is just a hollow metal ghost, its polished surface reflecting the faces of onlookers. He looks at Mary, Queen of Scots' prayer book, lying under glass, a relic for which his ancestor lost his head. Now its power has been sterilized by the vacuum of a display case. Its passion has become an exhibit. Everything here is an exhibit. The castle's screams, its agony during the siege, the whispers of conspiracies, all of it has been neatly dissected, labeled, and turned into a series of amusing facts for a tourist brochure. Its secrets are no longer buried under stone slabs. They are catalogued. And in this lies the house's greatest victory and its final sentence. The family survived. It won the long game. A war of attrition against time, kings, and revolutions. But what exactly did it win? It won the right to sell tickets to the scene of its own tragedy. It saved the house by giving its soul to be devoured by the crowd. The golden stream from tourists is the blood that keeps this magnificent body alive. But this body is no longer capable of love or hate. It is capable only of flawless operation. The Duke opens an inconspicuous door, and the hum of the tourist world vanishes. He enters the private quarters. Outsiders are not allowed here. Here, the castle ceases to be a stage and once again becomes a witness. But here, the silence is even heavier. Here, from the walls, the same ancestors look down on him, not as exhibits, but as judges. the executed Thomas Howard, Saint Philip, who died in the Tower. Their gazes do not ask for vengeance. They ask about meaning, and the Duke knows the answer. They survived because they learned the most important thing. They made the greatest deal in their history. They traded real power, for which their ancestors were sent to the block, for symbolic power. They exchanged the sword for the ceremonial rod. They no longer fight for the throne. They install it. They no longer weave conspiracies to seize the crown. They write the script for the coronation. This is the genius of their surrender. They understood that in the modern world, true power lies not in taking part in the battle, but in organizing it, in being not the actor, but the director, not the king, but the guardian of ceremonies. And the castle is the physical embodiment of this deal. It is no longer a fortress ready for battle. It is a perfectly preserved museum piece, a perfect but empty stage set. The camera pulls back. We see Arundel in all its Gothic splendor. It is flawless. It is eternal. It has won. And its eternal sentence is to be the guardian of a greatness that will never again be its own. This is how a history of survival is written. It is the story of a dynasty that paid for everything with the most expensive currency. It exchanged real power, for which men died on the scaffold, for its flawless imitation. They preserved the walls of their home by turning its soul into an exhibit under glass. But if winning the long game means becoming the eternal guardian of your own past, then who, in the end, was the victor? The man or the stone? This dialogue shouldn't end here. Share your thoughts in the comments, because that is how history ceases to be a museum exhibit and becomes alive. Your support will allow us to continue asking uncomfortable questions about the price of greatness.